Afternoon everybody. Here we have another model, another set model from the new Multimodels 3 model set, the 2015 version. And I bet you're thinking, at least some of you probably are, what is it? And I have, well, shall we say, voiced my concerns about this model. Now, perhaps more so, well perhaps not now, but in the near future, Meccano is going to be a lot more global than it has been for many years. And I think to start with certainly some of the smaller sets, to get the youngsters involved, the models have to be relevant. Now the fire engine in this set is relevant, very relevant. Majority of the world over there's some sort of fire engine. This is an airboat and is probably only relevant to people in the US. I dare say they're used elsewhere in the world, but marshlands such as Louisiana areas of the US, the Everglades, that sort of area. In fact, many years ago, before my time, there used to be a programme on the telly called The Everglades about a sheriff who used one of these, or something similar. That was before my time as well, 1961 it appears. So if you go on YouTube, put in Everglades, you'll see a bit of airboat, you'll find something to get your head round it for those that don't know. Now whilst it's not a very perhaps relevant model to the majority, it is a solid model. There are a couple of places where it could be improved, but it is a solid model and it's not too bad at all. Just to give you an idea of its relevancy or not, I asked 6 people, okay it was only 6 people, what they thought it was after I built it. And I've got the results on the back of my notes of the build, and it says here, first person I asked, hovercraft. Second person I asked, got it right, an airboat with some thought, quite a lot of thought. One person then said it was a sledge, and I can sort of see that, which has given me an idea for another model with this set. Again, probably not that relevant really in the world these days. A very seasonal thing you might say that would be. And one actually said it was a dragster. In all, 3 people said it was an airboat, but bearing in mind that all these people were sort of 40 plus. So it's a neat model, it's a solid model, there's very little play value. The fire engine is still far better for that than any of the other models so far. But for a build, this is probably a more I can't say it's an involved build, but it's more of a satisfying build, if you like. There's a little bit more to do, and there's plenty of parts left at the end of the build, which means it's a quick build. And for that I mean half an hour, including making notes. Now there were, I don't really want to use the word issues too much, but of course this is too strong a word really, but there are little foibles with the build, or with the instructions, or with the spanner. I might have mentioned that a few times. The first thing I had, arguably it was probably the most irritating thing, and it's purely because the instructions are so small. You can see the instructions on the fire engine video, but stage 1 you had to select 2 small spaces. They're those underneath there. Now that in itself isn't difficult, or shouldn't be, but I found it hard to decipher from the instructions and the inset parts list if they were small or large. Now the way to get around that is to look further on in the build, and you can look to stage 5 and then you can see the larger ones in use and you can compare and make your mind up quite easily then. That's really just because the instructions are quite small, that the diagrams are quite small, although as we've seen before they're still very clear. in the main. Let's get the spanner out of the way. The spanner grip at the what I call the box end was better, but the nut still didn't clip in place. I still find the bulk of the spanner too far away from where I want to hold. But I've said that before, but it may have been a set issue, and it doesn't seem to be at the moment. I really can't get on with the new spanner, but I'll continue to use them in the sets, because if the set models can't be made with the set tools, well, that's absolutely pointless. So far they can. There has been problems with another build that I've done, and the video will be coming soon. I did get away with it though with the set spanner, but that's for a future model. I seem to get the swirly arrows on the diagrams now, but it was only because the actual preceding diagram followed directly on to one with swirly arrows. So for example, let's say I was doing something this way, and the swirly arrow in the next diagram would show me to turn the model that way to do, say, something on the other side. I think with the last video, the loader, I think the problem with that was that the diagram with the swirly arrow on did not directly follow a turn in the model to do something else. It went on to do a little bit and then add that bit to the part that was described in a couple of diagrams earlier. But I sort of get it now. Sometimes it's fairly clear and other times not. The only thing with that I'll say is, I think a lot of the times I don't really see the need for them. From a, shall we say, slightly confusing point of view, possibly, if I'm not seeing it straight away or fairly straight away, what would somebody think of it who's never had a Meccano set before? Don't know. Time will tell on that one. I think it's already been mentioned on the internet somewhere, but some of the parts do have the part numbers stamped on it. I think it was quite faint, but oh yeah, you can just say it. The newer parts. Now this is going to struggle to focus. Just there, there's the part number C768. Now all of the parts have that, but that's useful. Finish wise, the paint's overall pretty good. The zinc plating a little dull, but it's a decent covering. But yet again, on the flange plate there was some paint missing. On the edge there, and I suppose edges are probably where you're going to get it most. That ain't too bad, but that there isn't very good at all. Right on the edge there. Again, it's an edge, but I wonder if that's something to do with all the parts being, or most of the parts being in one bag. Don't know. I haven't found any little bit of paint or whatever it is, plastic coating, anywhere in the bags. I haven't really looked, but that's something that needs looking at, I think. There's nothing really too much to say bad, or really nothing really bad to say about the build, which is good. It means a shorter video, I suppose. There's nothing really that surprises you. Everything is pretty easy to follow. I've mentioned the plastic grommet sizes and the awkwardness on the diagrams. Just to be careful, I suppose, for the build, when you come to stage 9 and you have to start bending these narrow strips in place, it is quite easy to bend the strips slightly too far, and they'll nearly always bend, and if you go too far, kink across a hole. So if you're pushing like away from the camera as we look at it now, you might get a crease across there. Now you don't really need to crease, because you don't have to go that far. As you can see, if I turn it over, it's only a slight bend. So a tip given to me by Ralph Lawton on my World War I London bus build, and you can see how to do it there, but because you don't use the axles in the set, you have them spare, and you can use these to ever so slightly bend these strips nicely. It's only a fraction really. That video has been spoilt by YouTube though, because of a soundtrack that I used a small bit of, and it was fine for months, and then for some reason that soundtrack has been wiped over the whole soundtrack of the video, so there's no instructions or information. There's several like that now, mostly of the World War I builds of the first 6, I think they are, first 6 builds of that. So just be careful on these strips, because it makes them a lot more easier to straighten if they're not kinked. It's a little bit fiddly to put this together. You might be better off putting these angled brackets here, these flat brackets, onto this double bracket first, and then sliding them in and bringing the narrow strips to meet. It's done the other way around. It's done onto these strips first, and then you secure it inside the double bracket there. The trouble with that is once it's fixed, there's no room to manoeuvre. Here's a little something that I think should have been really done in the model build itself, but hasn't. And as I said, the model is fairly solid. Anybody who's done Meccano before will know that 1-bolt fixings, especially where a model is going to be played with, risks a very good chance of coming loose. And sometimes you have to have a 1-bolt fixing for whatever reason it may be. Now, that reason may be there's no more parts left in that set, and whilst it's not a very solid way to build, it does work, even though it may come loose. But with this set, with this model, there being so many parts left, I think they missed a trick here. There would have been no real construction issues at all, or future construction issues or play value issues of the model coming apart. And that is on the side here. These narrow strips, I'll show you the other side, they come along here by 2 holes and are fixed by 1 bolt either side. Yet there is enough nuts and bolts left to add another one in there and one the other side. Why that hasn't been done, I don't know really. It could have been done quite easily, and make the model so much more structurally sound. Not that it's a big model. I liken this to something like the 1970s pocket Meccano models, although there's less destruction in the parts. This strip here is a flexible one, which will spring back to its normal shape, so they are very good parts. I like them, find a use for them on a few models. And I think that's about it, except to show you what it does. Well, detail wise, not bad. We've got 2 seats, and we've got, is where the engine is on the real thing, they're just inside there. And we've got the propeller on the back, which spins nicely. Just to adjust that so it's loose enough to spin, but not too lanky. And there isn't a lot I can tell you about the model, because it doesn't do a lot. So play value is minimal, but a nice build overall. Just be careful when you bend the narrow strips in. Careful selecting the spacers, and if you really struggle, you could always go on to Meccano.com website, do a search for the multi-models instructions, look up this one, and then you get a PDF and you can zoom in anyway.